right, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our last but certainly not least panel this afternoon. We have an excellent group of panelists here to speak to you about screenwriting and screenplays. And I'll let everyone do their own introduction, but would like to hand it off to the moderator, Phil Bleckman.
Hello. Awesome. Just one. I got one fan out here. Should I double up?
We need to.
No, wireless goes to Roy.
Oh, I'm
Sorry.
sorry.
It's all good.
Good call. Hello, everybody. My name's Phil Bleckman. I am a writer based out here in New York. I'm currently represented by a show on 54th Street called The Black Book. I've been writing for the last half decade or so. I figured we're just going to have a nice dialogue back and forth. Any questions that you guys have, we'll go through. We'll just go down the line right now. These guys will intro themselves, give you a little bit of their background, and then we'll kick things off.
My name is Craig Rice, and I never know how to say who I am. I'm an entertainment executive. I've worked in the music industry and the film industry, TV industry, and the theater industry. My background primarily, as relates to you, as I was a director, producer, and writer, basically in feature films, documentary films, and TV series work. I've worked with a number of writers. I've actually worked with more writers than the writers that I have, the writing that I have done myself. So as we go through this process, I can give you more of it because I've only done the entertainment my entire life. I've either been blessed or cursed since I went on stage at 5 years old, and I have done everything. So there is a career out there. It may not be the same career you start with, but it's a career that you will take through with the rest of your life. So.
I'm Denise Hewitt. It's very true. I started my career in fashion, ended up working in hospitality before working in entertainment. I'm a former producer, so TV and digital. And I recently started a script database called Scripted, which is basically one-stop shop for screenplays, so Google for scripts. And then all of you can go on and read screenplays, favorite stuff, share it with your friends. The idea being that now you can not only learn from the screenplays, but you can also, if enough of you and your friends show up, we can also push to get things greenlit that we want to see and not rely on books and franchises. So yeah.
So I'm Roy Frumkes. My involvement in the media goes back a little further than the rest. My grandfather was Houdini's agent. So from about age 5, I was curious about the industry. And then another turn was I was a zombie in George Romero's original Dawn of the Dead back in '78. So I've written about 25 screenplays. About 10% of them have gotten made, which is about average. The ones you might know would be The Substitute, which started a franchise. And if you don't know it, that says a lot for your taste and intelligence level. And something called Street Trash, which is a cult classic. I teach filmmaking and screenwriting, and I'm here, offering a bunch of stories and any advice I can give you.
Great. So I just wanted to get a gauge of where everybody else is. Does everybody in here, does everybody know they want to be a writer? Is everybody already on that path? Yeah? Pretty much, yeah? Everybody wants to be a writer, this guy? All right. This guy, I wanted to kick things off and see, so when you guys first got into writing, what was the initial inspiration that made you go, I want to be a writer, I want to work in entertainment, from what your previous jobs were?
I never wanted to be a writer. I'll tell you one thing that I know now at my age that I should have known is that you were going to do more writing. I don't care if you want to be a producer or a director, you're going to do more writing than you're going to do anything else. And so the writing sort of came from the fact that you have to, because I went to school to USC Film School as a director, but you have to write everything. You have to write, and as you get into the profession, you have to write, descriptions. I'm actually writing right now a creative director's approach to a series for HBO, which is how you're visually going to do it, how you see it. That's all words on paper. So writing is again, I should have started at 9. Learn how to write creatively, descriptively, and that's kind of how I did it. And I kind of kept just getting better at it. And I realized that I was a script reader in LA. So I read over 1,000 screenplays. That was my job. And as I was doing that, I realized that it would help me if I started writing more to understand that. And that's kind of how I did it. So I respect writers like nobody's business because I have no patience and I have very little discipline. And you guys are great. So.
I think most of us get into entertainment because, I think that storytelling is the quickest way to create change. and you want to tell a story, right? You want to impact the world in a larger way. And so I used to produce events, and I was, impacting these people on a 300-person, 500-person scale. And I realized that, okay, that's great, and we're doing these amazing things that are awesome and effective, but I want to reach way more people than that. I want to tell a story that's, going to do that and maybe inform how we live our lives or the choices that we make in a really kind of, easy way. It's a really digestible way to create change. So that was kind of my philosophy, and I kind of wrote a couple pilots because I wanted to produce something I was passionate about. I was producing a lot of kind of content at a network, at a digital network, and both of those places, there's a brand voice, and that you kind of have to adhere to. And I wanted to create something that was, more emblematic of my experience, my friends' experiences. And through that process, realized that, being a writer is really hard. It's not something that, I think it takes a lot of time and finesse. And that being said, you have to read. The more screenplays you read, the more you really understand what a great script is and what like a mediocre script is. Especially in today's marketplace, I would say that being good enough is not good enough. There's just a lot more competition. That being said, there's also a lot more opportunity. So yeah, that's it.
Interesting that you mentioned the age 9.
really fun.
That's when
Yeah.
I wrote my first novel.
Oh, really?
Yes, sitting in front of it, before they had electric typewriters, one finger at a time for a year. It's never seen the light of day, but, that's when I started. Well, I think I teach screenwriting, and the writing part is important, understanding the form is important and all, but I find that it's very important to figure out how you can discipline yourself so that you really can sit down and write. It's not taught that much, but there are a number of traps that are out there just waiting for you, not, the cell phone being one of them, that can kind of steer your unconscious away from focusing on what you'd like to do. I think probably if you understand the traps and can focus properly, you can all do writing, even those of you that think it's difficult. I had a writing partner with whom I wrote about, 19 scripts, and writing comes very easily to me for whatever reason, but he would sit there weeping over his computer, for 3 hours before getting a line out. So I know that, and he's so much better at dialogue than I am, which is why we were a good duo. So I know it is tough for some people, but there are ways to finesse it.
What are some of those, when you're talking about getting your focus down to, what are some of the tricks that you guys find useful when honing in on a particular script that you're working on?
To his point, I think knowing when you're the best. I'm the best in the morning, writing, and I have to every morning, like it or not, except Sunday, I get up at 6:30 and sit down and at least write for a couple hours. I'm terrible in the afternoon and even worse at night. I have a writing partner who lives in Florida. I live in Minnesota. He wants to write at like 7 o'clock at night. I'm like saying, trust me, you do not want to talk to me sensibly at that time. I'm way gone, if I'm not watching, Longmire or something like that, I'm not even paying attention to what you're saying. So I think finding your best time for writing, for me, because I teach, right now I'm teaching advanced filmmaking at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and I tell my students, you have a schedule and you have a deadline, you need to start really putting it out there. Even if you write 1 page a day, you need to really do that, and that's kind of how I do it.
I think that with anything, you just have to do it. Like, nothing gets done without you doing it, and I think that's a lot of, that's kind of the pressure you have to put on yourself, and same thing when you do, like, homework and things like that. It's the same thing, it just, later in life, it's just work homework. But the fact of the matter is, if you love what you're doing, it doesn't feel like work, right? So, like, if you know that, like, obviously there's hurdles in that, but, like, the end result is if you get that done, you can get the next round of notes, you can send that out. Like, there's all these exciting things that can happen by getting it done. I kind of focus on positive goals with anything that I do. So it's like, you can't take the next step unless you just plunge in, and so it's just like saying, I'm gonna do this, and this next 24 hours is what I'm doing. No distractions, cell phone away, whatever it is. But just get your head down so you can also, like, then go out and reap the next step and benefits.
Going along with what both of them said, Ernest Tidyman was an old friend of mine. He wrote French Connection, got an Academy Award. He wrote High Plains Drifter for Clint Eastwood. He told me that every night before he went to bed, he would think about the scene he was going to write the next morning. and that when he woke up in the morning, it had all been solved. His unconscious had taken over and slept on it. And I've never needed to do that because writing comes fairly easily to me, but that's certainly one thing you can do. But another thing is you can tell yourself and kind of convince yourself in a game-like way that you're being paid for what you're doing, that this is actually an assignment, and you can't not deliver 5 pages at the end of the week. I mean, you actually have to do that or you lose the gig, and whoever you were writing for just puts into the internet, this person isn't reliable, and you're blacklisted. You know, word travels fast. So if you treat it kind of like a pretend gig, it works better, you know, if you're under that kind of strange self-imposed pressure. But also the idea of, it used to be easier 10 or 15 years ago to isolate yourself so that there were no external forces drawing you away. Because I do believe most writing comes from the unconscious, and the unconscious communicates in your dreams, and that's the kind of chaotic world it lives in. And it doesn't like being forced to write something for 2 months in a row. And so it sets up all these traps to undermine you. Any of you that have already written, have you ever gotten halfway through a script and suddenly you get a better idea? That's just a ruse. It's not a better idea. That's your unconscious trying to get you off the thing. And when you get something like that, take an index card or you write it down in one paragraph and you say, I'll get to this one next. You know, you have to fight back against your unconscious.
So to remember that and to put it back on yourselves is figure out the time that you guys are most effective at writing, when you feel that you're getting the best ideas down on paper and actually articulating what you want to say. I want to tag on to that and ask you guys, when you want to tell stories to promote change, where do you find the inspiration for a story that you want to tell? What's the trigger or the moment or the things that you search out to find this is the story I want to tell and then actually devote time to it?
Let me just, one thing, the thing he said about the ideas, that's really good. I actually have a book by him on my desk that's my idea book because he's right about that. I never really figured that out. It took me years to figure that out. Your brain wants to take you in another direction after they're bored with what you're writing. Your brain is bored. So this idea book, just put it in the book and put it aside. The book's not going anywhere. Just put that idea there, get it out of your head, and then move on. As far as new ideas, I know this is New York. The New York Times, read it. And then I know when you're younger, it's really hard sometimes to be contemplative, which means really to be quiet and get away from your cell phone or iPad addiction and just be in the moment and what is going on and look at your life, what's going on with your friends' lives, what they're doing, what their issues are, what's going on in your family life, and then write from what it is that you feel about that scenario. Because all real true stories come from I don't care if they're Westerns and that's the backdrop or it's war, it all comes from sort of the humanistic aspect of your life. Even if it's a science fiction, it still comes, there's got to be an element in it, a thematic element that relates to you as a human being, and that becomes the story, the theme of the story, and then you might put it in a zombie world or whatever.
You have to write what's true to you. It's very clear when you're reading something that is authentic, when you read something that is not authentic. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I always say is that if it's true to you and you're passionate about it, that reads. And so if you're writing something you think is going to sell or that you think is a good idea, but you don't really love it, don't do it. Like, don't write something that you don't love. Like, the amount of time it takes to write something, you have to love and be convicted of that story. And so, a lot of why we tell stories, right? So it's whatever's particular to you. A lot of why I started my company is the reason I wanted to, write TV. Which is to showcase our world as it exists, make sure that everyone lives on the screen that lives in our world appropriately, so that we don't have, this gap in gender inequality. That's a lot of what I cared about. And so the ethos of our site, a lot of it is just making sure that we represent everyone in that way, so that all these writers can tell their stories and that we can do that. But I think that's my personal passion point, and I think that's why you have to figure out what yours is. And it can be something as simple as representing the high school experience, representing the 20s experience, because there's things you've learned that you want to share with your peers or people younger than you, and that's all valid and relevant. So I just think it has to be what is unique to you.
That is quite true. I think if you're writing outside your realm of experience, then you get into an area of screenwriting which is applied research. which is spending a lot of really fun time delving into the subject that you're writing about, so that it does feel real, when you put it on the page. And for me, I'd have to say that's probably the most fun part of what writing has always been for me, is kind of becoming an authority on some subject I knew nothing about, but the idea had popped into my head and I was prompted to write about it, But another thing is, and I believe, I've been doing this for over 45 years, but I think it still is probably true, that what the studios are interested in buying from you guys are kind of personal stories, urban stories, comedies, things like that. They're not interested, as a rule, in buying Star Wars stories. Those scripts come already packaged with directors and writers and stars and stuff. So you're best writing about what you know, oddly enough, and kind of keeping it, within a reasonable budget. Now, that being said, I teach at the School of Visual Arts, and one of the students wrote the screenplay that Bryan Singer did for Jack the Giant Killer, and another SVA student just wrote the script that he's doing next, which is the remake of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But Bryan was a student at SVA, and he kind of shows, he leans toward us. So I don't know if that's fair to say that Hollywood's picking scripts out of, big budget scripts out of the student pool.
I think they're looking for you guys because, again, as you get to a certain age, which most of us up here are, we lose perspective of what it's like to be teenagers in high school. And if you can give that authentic feel of what the challenges are, what your emotional balances are, you feel misunderstood at home, and your parents are too restrictive and they don't get you, and you decide to run away. Now that's something that you can understand. Now, if you put that in, and your parents turn out to be zombies, then that's the backdrop of your story. But you understand what it's like and can convey to an audience what the feeling is like to be young, misunderstood, and then I can relate to it. I can't relate to it in my own approach right now, but I can relate to it if you guys make it honest and true to yourself. Then I can say that's what I felt as a student, or that's what I felt as a kid. And Hollywood's looking for that kind of stuff. The 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, those kind of things, you can be creative enough that maybe get you a deal or get you placed, but it's not necessarily going to be where you should start.
No, should not start there. Just studios in general, they're making 4 movies a year. That's not exactly the best place for anyone to start. There's a bunch of micro studios. The beauty of this generation, right? And what's amazing about cell phones, because I'm going to do this, is social media. You have the ability to build your audience base, you have the ability to share with your friends, you have the ability to promote yourself, you have the ability to really create your lens in life. Separate from that, you have the ability to take video, you have the ability to create your own work, you have YouTube, you have all the tools to do it yourself. So separate from the system, because the system works to a degree, and there's things getting made, but there's a lot of things that start outside of the system, like Broad City, and all these other shows that start as web series that get incubated and made into TV shows. And so I think what's really exciting for you is that you can experiment, you can have fun, and then you can figure out what works for you. And maybe that's collaborative, and maybe that's a singular experience, but you can do it all from behind your computer screen or from your phone, and that's rad.
I'm gonna tag on to that too, because the work and the way to do it if you're an unknown or you don't know how to go about it is to make it, actually do it, because the only thing that's going to come from it is you're either going to continue to refine your work, or you'll come across a new idea that all of a sudden takes your work to the next level. So I think that that's a really important thing, is to never feel hesitant that you can't do something. If you don't know how to do it, build a team and figure out how you can get those ideas that you want to tell through a script or through a story, and figure out the ways that you can do it in a lot of the ways that Denise had just pointed out. I wanted to talk a quick second, because you guys made me think about something when thinking through a script, is a sense of self-awareness to look at one side of a story and to challenge it from the opposing view. That way you can actually tell a fully realized story from both sides to really get your argument and inspire change. Was that just something that came naturally to you guys, or did you find something that helped you get that sense of awareness to tell your stories?
I had a lot of help.
Yeah? What kind of help?
Because I kind of was a producer and I was writing to, I was I'm smart, I can figure this out. So I read a bunch of books, wrote first draft of, basically I did like a new wave Daria, for those of you that know what Daria is. Female animated comedy. Sent it to my friends that are writers, TV writers, staff writers, and just got a bunch of notes and like demolished my script, like in the best way. And I was out there and I was like, cool, because I don't know, I'm learning. That's the whole point, is that, give me all these hard critiques. Tell me that this is because there's a lot of things about screenwriting that are different from writing, and there's a lot of nuances and things that can make a script really compelling in 1 second. And so I got to like absorb all that and just like be really open to the fact that like, I'm taking myself out of this. I'm learning. It's okay that this first draft is a failure, because then you hone it, and I just kept getting rounds and rounds of notes that really made it better.
But, I think for me, also I think it's rejection. My first thing that I sent out, I think in LA, a lot of the studios use red pens. I swear they must have went through red pens, crossing, throwing. It was just, and I was devastated. I'm not gonna say it didn't hurt. I'm way not gonna say it didn't hurt. But you had to like step back and say, okay, these people know what they're looking for, and all the suggestions are constructive criticism, and I never want to go through that again. So I don't know if you get it any other way other than I don't ever want to have this feeling again in my life, so I better learn what it is that I need to learn to be better at what it is that I say I want to do.
That's one reason, the idea of finding multiple, really being able to have voices for multiple characters. That's a nice reason to have a writing partner. There were many reasons to have a writing partner. For me, the main reason was that while I was sitting there writing, I knew he was somewhere waiting to read it, and it was very inspirational to me to write more and more, to turn in for him. We never, ever in 19 years sat together in a room. We would just have meetings for a month, kick around the idea. The ideas always pretty much came from me. And then when he found one he liked, that he could write with me, we'd sit and talk out the structure. And then I would take the first pass, which would be the treatment, and then he would take the next pass, which would be filling in the dialogue into the script. Then it would come back with lots of notes.
Where I could come up with the male characters and say this is where the guy is going to respond to them, It'd be being women trying to get to him, So and it's fun. That kind of stuff is fun stuff too.
It's also just good to learn how to work with other people, because whether or not you're working on a film script or you're in a TV room, but every TV show is a writer's room full of people. So if you don't know how to work well with people, you're probably not going to keep that job. So it's a good thing to learn how to collaborate and hear other voices, and I believe that collaboration is also always better than being on your own, because people informing what you're doing helps you improve and challenges what you think. So I think it's really important.
And yet, trust me, you wouldn't want this guy in the same room with you for a couple of months. Since there's a camera on, then I'm going to leave it at that. In fact, though, I can tell one little story, if you'll all allow me. He and I were out in LA, and we were hired and being paid to write a screenplay, a true life story for TNT channel. And my co-writer, I'm easygoing, and my co-writer is the opposite. He won't tolerate fools. He sees everyone as a fool, probably including me, but he has to put up with me. And we're sitting there with 5 producers who have read our script that are about to give verbal notes to us. And the first guy says, well, what's the leitmotif? Now, instantly that means he took one of these weekend courses and to get him up to speed so that he can converse with a writer. A leitmotif, of course, being, the main theme that runs through it. But my partner wouldn't let him off the hook. My partner said, well, in the first act, we're going to go with fluorescent. and I can see their faces starting to drop, except for this woman on the end. She's going, huh. Then he says, in Act 2, we're going to switch over to tungsten. It's going to really be interesting. And now these people are like seething. They know they're being made fun of, and she's still confused. And I'm watching him, and my partner says, and then in the third act, we're going to do the Kubrick thing. We're just going to go with candlelight. So they're all just ready to leave, and she's going, huh. She finally gets it, And she says, that's great. Can we make is the main character sympathetic enough? And my partner says, we'll give him a puppy. And it was, I thought the point was well made. about the adversarial relationship between producers and writers. But on the other hand, in future years, they asked me kindly not to bring my partner along to meetings.
Right? In writers' rooms, as she was saying, I don't know if you know this, but like Empire, because I have some friends, there are 12 writers on that show. 12 writers in the writing room, which is, I can't imagine how they do that without a whip and a chair, but it's a lot of input, a lot of ideas, but
Also,
that's TV.
the most diverse room in all of Hollywood,
Yeah,
by the way.
yeah, exactly, it is, and it's you know, and I have a cousin that writes for comedy, and she's written several comedies. There's usually, 9 to 10 to 12 writers in a room. It's a lot of people talking with a lot of ideas. I don't know how, again, I don't know how it works, because I've never done that size of a writer's room, but it's not just one person writing these screenplays or these TV plays, whatever. It's a group of people who come up with ideas, and people are good at specific things. You don't have to be good at everything. You find a partner who's better at dialogue, maybe, or somebody who's better at scene structure, or knows how to make this thing snap and move, because pacing and tempo is really a strong part, and anybody who's read a lot of scripts knows that's where most people fall down, is like, okay, it was great, it started out great, and then it's kind of just died in the second act, and just kind of laid there for a while, and it maybe came back at the end, but if you don't get past the first, and I'm not one of those people that does the 30 pace, 36 is where it needs to, all that stuff. I'm way not into that, but it definitely has to have a rhythm.
Question for everybody out here. Is everybody junior or senior, more or less? For the most part, everybody is? Yeah? So everybody knows that you guys know where you're going to school, or you have a couple of schools picked out already? Yeah? Cool. So you guys have a wealth of knowledge up here, and I'm curious, what is the things that you guys are right now curious about in your writing? Where are you guys at? You're thinking, I don't understand how to do this, or I find myself getting caught up in this particular area, or if you even know what that is or not yet. I just want to open up a dialogue with you guys and see where's your guys' heads at in your writing and the things that you care about. Yeah?
Well, right now I'm having,
What's your name?
Noah, I'm Noah.
Hi, Noah.
So, right now I'm having really, really bad writer's block. Like, I feel like my brain is cooking up something that's gonna be, I don't wanna say my ego's down here big, but it's something that I really wanna put all my work and effort into, but I can't seem to. I like what you guys said about applying, things in your life and just, staying away from a forced distraction and whatnot, and, looking to, what's relatable and what's going on in your family and incorporating that in what you create as a writer. But, for me, right now, I feel like I'm waiting for something to happen, but I feel like I'm not able to, actually, I feel like there's a lack of inspiration to be able to apply what has happened, in my life, my friend's life, or, acquaintances I know, and putting that together into something relatable and something with a lot of, quality, something authentic like that.
Could everybody hear him?
Yeah.
Great. So I'm going to simplify down what you said and throw it at you guys. How do you overcome writer's block?
Well, in a sense, that's what I was talking about, you know, those various little tricks. You find, you know, you're fairly young still. If you're going to college and you take screenwriting classes, they'll help you with that. What form are you writing? What are you thinking of writing for?
I'm film, pretty much. Just
Okay.
I really want to write a whole lot of comedy. Comedy is something that I'm really into, but I'm also in the same universe of drama as well.
Well, one thing to consider, it sounds like you've been writing alone. One thing to consider is getting a writing partner
Yeah.
and seeing how that brings the best out in you.
Are you trying to write it in this, I mean, this is a question, are you trying to write it in the screenwriting format?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that may be part of it too. I mean, one thing that Francis Ford Coppola does is when he just starts writing. Don't get rid of the structure, get rid of the format, just start writing about, you know, a day in the life of whatever character. Just start writing a story about somebody, and forget the format and interior, exterior, all that. Just start writing the story, so it's, you know, based on some kind of a theme or something.
I can never start on paper. Like, I gotta like sketch it out, and I gotta, brainstorm from there, and stuff like that.
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
I can't ever I can't ever do it formatted. Like, I have to draw it out. I gotta, put bullet points down, stuff like that. I can't start that way. I get what you're saying.
Okay. Yeah, just start writing it. Just start writing, just start writing the story. So if you've got an idea, Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have a little brother.
Okay, and where'd you grow up?
Dallas.
Dallas? What's Dallas like?
A lot of a lot of horses, a lot of space. It's kind of boring.
Right.
sometimes.
Okay, start right there. That's the first few lines of your thing. It's like Dallas is kind of boring, kind of there's a lot of horses, and now I have a little brother. And just keep writing. You know, just keep writing. If it's, I don't know what, I've been there, Dallas, but I couldn't write that.
One thing that like just stuck out to me is like he asks, what's it like, and your response of laughing. Everybody in here goes, I want to know what makes him think that reaction. You know,
Right.
so if you can find a way to articulate whatever that reaction was, that I think will be helpful for you.
I think I'll just like take the pressure off. Like maybe it'll be big, maybe it won't. But like just write. Like it could be like a really mundane idea, but what you're gonna learn from that exercise is probably valuable. I think you'll get to your magnum opus, right? Like you'll get there. Nothing we do like when we start, we don't know what it's gonna be. And so I think that's part of the process. Just start, and then maybe it turns into something that you're so excited about. And just take the pressure off.
Who else? Who's up?
50 years ago, I couldn't use a computer to write. I had to use a typewriter, and there was no going back. If I had to start over again if I didn't like what I'd written. You could start in the middle of your script with a scene that you really feel comfortable with, and then work in either direction from there. The scene that started The Substitute was in the middle.
Which I saw the movie and I thought it was good.
Did you?
Yeah, I paid money for
Oh, my
it too,
goodness,
here in
thank
New York.
Deep.
Best compliment you can get. Yeah.
Really? And the only one, too.
That's all you need. I'll pay to see your work.
So a little differently, I have I have an idea. And I have
What's your name?
My name is Jack.
Hi, Jack.
I have an idea, and I know what I want to write. I can kind of describe the story, but when it comes to dialogue, I get like the pressure of writing almost a cliche dialogue or something that doesn't sound natural holds me back. How do you overcome that?
I create character banks because, as I mentioned earlier, dialogue's not my strong point. And when I'm not writing with a writing partner, what I do is I go out and I find the person that really represents and talks like who I want, and I ask them if they'll have lunch with me. I bring along a tape recorder. I feed them the stuff that they respond to, and I get really good dialogue that way. Now, and let me point out one example. In the case of The Substitute, okay, that's about a Merc team that infiltrates into a high school, into a troubled high school. And there's a big battle at the end at the high school in Brooklyn. And I networked to find a couple of mercenary soldiers that I could talk to. They live pretty incognito lives. They're hard to find, but I found a few. And then I would sit down with them, and I said to this guy, this is the third act. You guys come to the school. You 7 guys, you're expecting an equal force. Instead, 100 people show up. And so it's the end for you. You turn to your buddy, and what do you say? And he says, well, first of all, who got there first? I said, you did. He said, we killed them all. And I said, oh, God, well, I don't want you to. That's not the way the script's going to go. I said, let's pretend, just for the sake of the script, that you're outnumbered, you're going to be killed. You turn to your friend, and what do you say? And he says, disfigurement time. I said, wow, I almost changed the title of the script to Disfigurement Time. And I was like, I never would have thought of that on my own. So, finding people that are appropriate and talking to them. And by the way, they're all delighted to talk. It doesn't matter if they're nuclear scientists, psychics, they get tired of what they do and they love to sit down with someone and chat. Is that helpful?
I'll tag on to that too. When you say you're afraid of writing something cliche or something unnatural, write it. Write it first. You have infinite time to refine and to edit and do everything. Editing is the easy part. Writing is the hard part, so just write it. And if it comes out cliche, you can fix it later.
If you have a good screenplay and the dialogue is the only thing they say is cliche, then you're actually, that's easy, because then that's rewriting. Yeah.
Yeah.
With endings,
What's your name?
I'm TJ.
Hey, TJ.
With endings, how do you come up with endings, and if you have multiple endings, like how do you figure out which is the right one?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I I think you have to then do some work to know your story and know your characters, right? Because like certain endings, it's only specific endings that'll be right for your characters. I was working with a couple of screenwriters recently, and they had a bunch of notes on one of their screenplays, and these people had a lot of issue with their ending, and I had a long conversation with them because I think the screenplay is pretty amazing. And I was like, but like, how do you feel about the ending? Like, that's our ending. And I said, okay, then you have to know what are your negotiables and what are your non-negotiables. And I think as a writer, that's super, super important, because people are always gonna get you try to change things. So you have to know what you're willing to compromise and what you're not willing to compromise. And so your ending being something that like, you should know that full story the same way like the best TV shows, like Breaking Bad, Mr. Robot, they walked into that room, Vince Gilligan knew that was a 7-season show. You know, Mr. Robot is a 5-season show. They know exactly what story they're telling and how it's ending, and they're not gonna change that because they don't want to, because why should they have to? Like, the rating systems are also different now. But I also think that that's a really important thing for a writer to know, is like, know your story and know the minute points you're flexible on.
Yeah, I'm doing this thing with HBO, a series with HBO right now. We know how it's going to end, and because it's structured, it's two 2.5-hour episodes. It's kind of the Oliver Kitteridge stuff. We don't. Yeah, it's weird kind of construct. It would not start out as 7 1-hour episodes, and I think HBO's fallen in love with this new format. But we have to know how that ends. That's one thing. If you're doing a screenplay, I just wrote something. I started with the ending, and it was suicide at the end. That was the whole basis of the whole movie, was that they ultimately commit suicide at the end. And as we wrote the screenplay, we realized they can't do that. So now we have to go back and rewrite, and only because the characters and the structure of the story have dictated the fact that they would never do that. So then you just have to you've change the ending, because it doesn't work that way anymore. It's what really learning the structure is about. It's like, why is the first act there? You know, what's the, exciting incident? Learn those things, and then you can start to play. It becomes like jazz. Then you can start to play with the form. But to her point, if you submit your scripts to get jobs, it needs to be like this, because they want to make sure you understand it.
You're making me think, this is coming to mind, it's making me think of, because we're talking music, Ludacris once said, rules were meant to be broken, but you can't start with broken rules.
Right, yeah.
So know your structure and then you can break them. Yeah,
Yeah.
the inspirational Luda.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. What's up?
Could you talk about,
What's your name?
Only if you tell us your name.
Cullen,
Hey, Colin.
could you talk about the pitch process and shopping your scripts around, specifically finding people to give your scripts to?
Everybody hear that question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have an agent, and I at various times have had a manager as well, so that's a pretty big chunk of my earnings that goes, but they are supposed to, help me in ways I can't help myself. And I would go out to LA once a year to pitch projects. And the manager and the agent would tell me in advance, they had done their homework, the groundwork. They would tell me who I'm meeting at each studio, what the studio's looking for, and that I should structure my pitch in that way. So I'd go in with my writing partner, and there'd be small talk about New York, how's New York, this and that, and this and that. And then, what do you guys got? And we'd start with something that did not fit what they were looking for. And then we'd say, but, we have a lot of other stuff. What are you looking for? And they'd say, well, we're looking for a teen comedy. And then I'd usually be the one to say, wow, we've got one of those. But we all knew that's what he was going to say. And we rehearsed in the hotel room the night before, And so there's a kind of finessing the pitch.
The more you pitch, the easier it gets. You definitely hone in on it the more you do it. But I think that the biggest thing to convey is passion, right? Like, no one's gonna buy into a pitch if you're not that enthused about it. And there's a lot of people that are good at pitching, and there's a lot of people that are not, and it's a skill. And I think that same thing with anything, interviewing for jobs. You have to hone that, and it's an important skill for writers. And I actually think it's something that's harder for writers, most writers. And so that's a lot of why, we built the website we built, was that you had an ability to put your work out there and get people to read it and have access to all that. If maybe that pitching isn't your strong point, or maybe you don't have representation yet. We have 80% of the writers on our site are rep, 20% are not. And the whole idea is that we can create opportunity elsewhere through the power of the internet. But I think that the more that you can start kind of working on how to tell your story, the better off you're gonna be once you get out there, because you do have to sell it.
Yeah. Part of the thing that I learned actually from a producer that when I was younger, it said you need to start pitching, because I was not very good at it. And you should pitch the story to an executive so that they want to pay you to find out how it turns out. So it's intriguing and it's exciting, and it's like, the mouse actually gets the poison cheese, and that it would have happened, if you start you're telling them a story, basically, but you tell them so that if by the end of your pitch, you tell them just enough so that they say, okay, how much money do you want me to pay you to find out how this turns out?
And that's just one thing that I've noticed a lot, like amongst my friends who are writers and people who are just starting out. If you're passionate about the story that you're telling, you never have to apologize for that story. You can go in and be committed that this is a good story that you want to tell and that you're telling it for the right reasons, if you know that you're telling it for the right
But
reasons.
also, like, never apologize anyways.
Yeah.
Never.
Because everything's objective, and it's like,
Yeah.
just because that's not that person's thing doesn't mean that's not someone else's thing. And I just think that, like, you never should apologize for the work that you've done. Like, you've done the work.
Yeah. You just have to, my problem was that I was telling them too much of a story. So as soon as they're yawning or they go out of the room and come back, you're going on too long. That's why you got to keep them engaged in the process so that they really need to put their money down. If you want to find out how this story goes, then pay me to do that. But if I'm sitting there telling details, and the kid went to school with them, and which was too much information.
So boiling down, if you're whoever you're looking to help put your script, like produce your script, know your audience, know your room.
Yeah, you practice. I had to learn how to practice to do that. You just don't. Very few people can tell a story that way and compelling enough that people are just raptured. They're not going to leave, even if they got to go to the bathroom. They can't go because they want to know. What happens, and then what happens, and then what happens, and then what happens. You got to practice that. That's not just I wrote this story and it's really good.
That satisfy the question, Colin?
Yeah.
Cool, absolutely. What's up in the back, blue shirt? That's you.
My name's Robert.
Hey, Robert.
And this isn't really about like writing scripts, but hey, rules are made to be broken. Ludicrous. What are each your favorite films and books?
Great. Who wants to take that one?
Wow.
Favorite films and books is what we're talking.
Wow. Is there a number?
Yeah. Let's say what is your number one in this moment and why?
My number one film in this moment probably is, off the top of my head, is Mean Streets, actually. And the book is Kane by Gene Toomer, which is probably no one knows who he is, but
Look him up.
read the book, Kane, Gene Toomer. And if you've not seen, how many people have seen Mean Streets? Oh my God, you guys got to go to the movies here, or rent them, or go online. Netflix.
My favorite movie is a weird, obscure movie. It's called The Spirit of the Beehive. It's a 1970s Spanish movie. I took it in like college course that was film as a transformative. Very much transformed my life. It is a pretty epically beautiful and amazing, interesting movie. And nearly perfect. There's very few nearly perfect movies. So that one. And then I would say, I don't because I read so many scripts, I don't really read that many books anymore. But I am reading a book right now that's really amazing. And it'll come out this spring, and it's called The Nest. And it's really, really a wonderful novel. And I decided, I was like, oh, it's been a minute since I read a novel. This is so great. Really like it. So yeah, that's what I'm going to recommend.
Well, seeing as I teach, and I teach 3 film history classes, I don't tend to read, I tend to read nonfiction, because I'm constantly trying to gather stories and facts to tell to my classes. But in recent years, the books that have influenced me the most, and they even carried me through 2 surgeries, was the books by Walter Mosley, and he wrote Devil in a Blue Dress, and he's just this beautifully poetic, eloquent mystery writer, and I had the chance to meet him not long ago, and I said, I have to tell you that I had 2 surgeries, 3 years apart, and each time a new Easy Rawlins book had come out, and reading it pulled me through, literally pulled me through, and I saw he was scowling, and then he kind of walked away, and I said to someone who was with him, I said, what's the problem? He said, well, he just killed him off in the new book. It was odd. So, film, I kind of differentiate between best and favorite. The bests are almost on everyone's list, but the favorites are the ones that you saw at the right time, they struck you, and they're the ones actually, in some regard, that you're remaking or looking forward to remake on your own. So the best, it would be boring for me to relate them, but I'm crazy about a movie called Darby O'Gill and the Little People by Disney, and I love Night of the Hunter, Kiss Me Deadly, films like that.
I'll fire off my favorite book and movie. Favorite movie right now is a movie called The Perfect Host, which is a movie I'd be surprised if anybody has seen because it was off the radar, but it's a David Hyde Pierce movie. And my favorite book is a book called Test of Metal by Matthew Stover. The reason I like both of those is that they are both very, very well developed and three-dimensionalized characters that all drive the story. The stories are very character-driven, and I appreciate those things. Thanks, Robert. White shirt.
Once you have,
What's your name?
my name is David.
Hey, David.
Once you have an idea down, how would you decide what genre you place that idea in first story?
When you have an idea, what genre would you place it in? How do you define the genre that you?
Yeah. So for example, a friend and I we have an idea for a script.
Yep.
But he wants to make a drama. I want to make a comedy. How would we define which one of those would go into?
Are you funny? I mean, that's the first thing you gotta decide.
Put you on the spot.
I think there's something called a dramedy.
Right, dramedy, yeah, which is kind of the middle thing.
That's a lot of
I mean,
what we
it's a
watch these days.
That's a comedy that's not funny.
Has
so-
heart. That's
No,
not
that's
true.
easy.
You can do something that has heart, but has funny moments, right? Like I think there's a way to meet in the middle, or you could just start writing it and see if it lends itself more to either one.
I mean, is that what you're asking? Is that what you?
Well, I mean that was just a specific example, but I mean in general. So for example, if you have an idea and you have an idea for a story, but you don't know where to set it in, how would you decide to set it either in historically or in a science fiction environment? How would you know that, or is that something you could just randomly pick?
What's your gut say? I mean, I think if I'm writing a story and I'm thinking about how am I setting it, is it going to be a drama or a comedy? I think there's elements of comedy and drama in each other. And if you're looking to define this as a comedy or a drama, you'll know when you've told the story that you want to tell. And you'll be able to frame it as this is a comedy or this is a drama, or it has elements of both, but you can pick which one you feel is stronger. But write your story, and it should. I think it would guide itself. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because so there's a theme of it, of your story, which can be in any period of time. But if you want to write about, I'm not watched the Nick, but everybody tells me I should see the Nick. That's a specific story background that can only be there. Now, could you write that story in a modern hospital? Yeah, but it would be a different story with different principles and different dynamics with the characters. I think, this is my personal opinion, is first of all, it's all about story. Stories are about characters. So who are your characters? And they'll sort of tell you what your period of time is. There's a difference in the world, in America, from the 1800s or the 1700s than it is today. And even after, I just went to the 9/11 memorial. I mean, I used to work down here on Wall Street when I first moved to New York, and to go back there today, it's actually, America's changed so much since that from the time I was here in the 80s in America, in New York, I should say. And so is it before 9/11 or is it after 9/11? That's a whole new group of people with a whole new mindset.
But he had no idea what the third act should be. But he knew that the film should be a comedy. But I decided the film should be a film noir. And he sat there across the table, like staring at me, dumbfounded. But I told him let's try it, and he agreed. And I'm like, there's a psychiatrist I know who's like the leading expert in the country on a certain disorder. And every Sunday he goes to Chinatown, eats dim sum, and plays chess. So I'm joining him tomorrow morning at 8:30 to go over this to see if my ideas are at least plausible. So there's an instance where someone came to me thinking something was heading in a certain way. I had a different idea, and I pitched it, and then he was open enough to say, let's see what happens. Now, if it doesn't work, I could rewrite the third act and just keep it as a light comedy.
There's going to be structures that you guys find that when you go to school, they're going to teach you a foundation of those things. I mean, if you're looking for just a straight answer to have something applicable, the basis usually is, if it's a drama, it deals with something that's moral, and if it's a comedy, it deals with something that's social. So if it's social issues, it's likely going to gear towards comedy. If it's a moral issue, it'll likely gear towards drama. But it's subjective. It's going to be in particular to every story that you're telling. So I was pointing at him saying, it's always going to go back to story. I fully agree. And if you're looking for a time setting, what's the most effective way to tell your story? If it's in the 1400s and you've done your research and think that's going to be the best, then put it in that.
I mean, New York was, you guys have no clue what New York was like in the 80s. I would tell you, this is a whole nother place than it is today. I mean, it was like, New York was like your drunk uncle, bachelor uncle, crazy. Anything went in New York. They didn't have any laws. It was just wild. It was the Wild West, that movie that's out right now, The Most Violent Year. I mean, that was what New York was like. There was more killings and robberies and everything was going on here. That's not this New York. This is Disneyland now.
So congratulations on being in this time of New York.
Yeah. But so if your story is about all this, then because of whatever the characters are going through, then you need this. But if you wanted it to be wilder and when there are artists living in Manhattan and all that stuff, then then you're talking about a different time frame. So you can't just say we're going to make it there because we think it's cool. It's based on your characters and what you're trying to say.
Yeah, stairs.
My name is Marshall.
Hey, Marshall.
Also, a good example is like when Stanley Kubrick was writing the script for Doctor Strangelove, how it went from drama to a comedy. Is a good example of myself. Also, what are some the most prominent problems with screenplays written by lesser experienced? What are some of the main problems that a lot of scripts have?
I don't read a lot. I mean, I can tell you what I don't like is young people who write gangster scripts that don't know anything about crime. Dumb. They're writing from what they've seen other things. And they just want to act like they know. Criminals are criminals because criminals are criminals. Okay? You can't pretend like I'm a criminal because I want them to. That's not the way you need to get into it. And a lot of especially because I read a lot of student scripts, they like that stuff. Because it's what they see, and it's not authentic, it's not real, it's parodies of other movies they've seen, if it's Goodfellas or whatever else is out there right now.
Yeah, so subject matter needs to be true to you to a degree, right? But separate from that, it's the little structural stuff that make a really, really big difference. So whether that's, when I'm looking at two characters, if they sound similar and I have to refer back to figure out who is who, you have not done your job on that character development because I should be able to distinguish their voices. That's the kind of a thing if characters are seeming too similar. Descriptions, very, very hard thing to do well, but there's a lot of lazy location and character descriptions. Okay, she's blonde and she's tall. I know nothing about her. That's not interesting to me. That's not compelling. I want to know, a quirk about her that in 2 seconds I know exactly who she is, right? And same thing with locations. I recently read a script where it was we were in this bar in Manhattan and had some hats. Not too many hats, just the right amount of hats. And I was oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. You're we've been there. And that's the point, something where I could be that makes sense to me and I feel that and I understand that. And I think there's a lot of, it's obviously structure and technique is important, and that's where that really plays in really well. But you have to put your voice in there too, and you have to give us. You have such short amount of space and time to give us the detail we need that you have to be very particular about the words that you are choosing.
In a broad sense, most writers I know look back on their first few screenplays and can't believe it was written by the same person, and. So what I'm saying is you just need to keep writing and figure these things out. When I'm done with a script today, as in 40 years ago, I would give it to 5 people and let them go through it, and sometimes pay them to go through it, and just annotate it, everything they really liked and everything they didn't. And if there were things that 4 out of 5 people liked, that was good. If there was things that 1 person out of 5 didn't like, I'd think about it. If there were things that 4 people out of 5 didn't like, I'd change it, even if I thought it was the best scene in the film, because I wasn't getting that point across, So that also helps, to have people read your stuff. And over at the school, we also have people act out the scripts. And hearing it read is really helpful.
That's a really helpful
Yeah,
thing.
that's the thing,
Yeah, we
yeah.
do monthly pilot readings with my company, and so the writers have ability to hear it out with a bunch of great actors, and it's really helpful.
Yeah, I do it in advanced film. Every student that's going to do a film, we do a table reading of their script where they just listen to the other students read it, and they sort of act it out. Because I think that is the best, and it's what that really happens in the industry. It's important, I think, because sometimes, again, we write in this isolation, and we need to hear the whole description of the setting and the actors talking to each other and really doing that, and so much comes out. I used to produce new dramas for television for the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center. They used to had a TV division, and people who have written a lot, but mostly in the theater world, we would do their productions as TV, and we would have, obviously, some of the best actors in the world read their scripts to them. And it was interesting. They would definitely, after they heard that, they would go away feverishly rewriting it, because they would ultimately hear the dialogue and then realize the setting of the scene was in the wrong place or the wrong location. And I'm talking about professional writers. It's important. It's the medium that we're in. It's really about, again, I go back to, this is all about characters. It's all about people. It's not a novel. You can read a novel and it can be 900 pages. And with her point, I'm not a big reader of fiction. I force myself to read it, because if not, I just read nonfiction. But novels can take that kind of time to set up stage and a feeling, and what's psychologically what's going on in the character's head. We got 90 minutes now, and your attention span is shorter than that. Don't fool me. I know. I watch you guys watch movies. So you probably have 60 real minutes of concentration time. So it's got to move fast. It's got to hit the points right away, or we're going to lose you.
I'm gonna pass around. Yeah, right here. Hi, Alice. Do we storyboard before we start our scripts?
I mean, draw the pictures? Right? I try to not. I don't write as a director. I write as a writer. I don't.
Every writer works differently. I mean, if you want to make an outline beforehand, if you want to storyboard it, you want it, everyone's different, and it's like whatever works for you. There's no right or, there's no one way.
If I'm doing a fantasy film, I do have some drawings done in color, and I include them in the script. So I don't really trust producers or executive producers to know what they're reading, and this helps a little if they can see what I'm writing about.
All right, everybody, we're gonna take one more question. I got time for one more? All right, I'm gonna take right here in the middle, blue shirt.
My name's Lila. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the collaboration process. Did you guys just start bouncing ideas off each other, or do you have a whiteboard and just write this plot down or something like that?
The collaboration process. How do we go about the collaboration process?
In a writer's collaboration?
It depends on it also depends on the writer. I've done it before where to break down the beat of each, scene and what's happening, and you use index cards, tape them up on a board so you kind of see the flow of the story, and then you can start to rearrange things. Maybe this should go here, maybe that should go there. That's kind of how they do it in writers' rooms. It's how they kind of break down scripts, but it's different for everyone.
I do it that. I mean, I use Post-it notes. It's just the same thing. It's just get the ideas down to kind of get I come from the sort of the beats. Again, I believe the films have a rhythm, so you get the beats, and this is what needs to happen next, and then that's how. But you decide on the story, so that's basically how you first start. Is that we're going to do a story about World War II soldiers. Then you start just brainstorming and laying beats down. What would be great? What would work?
And I kind of kicked it around before, what I do with my writing partner. Before me, he had another writing partner, and they would be in the same room 8 hours a day, pacing, writing and stuff. I don't do it that way. You find the way that's most conducive.
Yeah. My writing partner in Miami, this is the first time I've ever done it where we're not in the same room, and this is an experiment too, is that he drives me crazy because he sends me notes all the time. I have a hard time with that. It's like we have assignments we're supposed to do. Let's do our assignments. He kind of sends stuff, so it throws off my flow. So I had to tell him. I said, listen, Just wait till we talk together before you don't send me emails of new ideas based on the ideas that we had the night before. Let's keep it consistent. Let's start keeping a paper trail, because if not, I'll get lost in the ideas. I mean, then I want to do. This happened the other day. He said, maybe we should add a fashion designer part to the story. I said, whoa, we're talking about doctors, and now we're talking about fashion, because he's going off,
I find when I'm working with somebody else is make sure that we both understand the story that we want to tell, and then the means that we want to tell it by. That way, all of the ideas that we're coming up with collaboratively are going towards the same goal. So we're not shooting for a different plan. We all want to accomplish the same thing. And if you guys establish that groundwork going in, then you should have a really good fluid work environment if you work well with them. So. Thank you guys for coming out. We are all approachable. Yeah, go for it.
Kindly say a little something in conclusion?
Yeah, so let's go. We can go down and everybody can say any last thoughts that they have.
Okay. I've been teaching for 38 years at the School of Visual Arts, and there's been a change in the past few years. I'd say 2 or 3 years, which is that writing classes, production classes, and all are shifting away from features and into episodic TV. And the feeling, and SVA is a school that tries to stay ahead of the curve. And one of the teachers said to me the other day, I believe we're in the twilight of this film department as we once knew it. And, there are over 20 episodic TV shows being shot in New York. There's supposed to be 40 by next year, and 200 around the country. And as was mentioned, there's 4 film features coming out of each studio each year. So there is a huge part of the future that's going to be in episodic TV. It's something you might think about as high school students.
Web content, all the things. I mean, there's micro studios popping up too. I mean, I don't think film's going anywhere. I just think it's going to be it's just going to change. But I think that, I mean, I think it's film, like TV and web, there's huge amounts of opportunity for up and coming, filmmakers and writers.
I look at, my original background, I didn't go into that. It was in the music industry. I played in it, but then I also managed Prince and Bobby Brown, Whitney Houston, a bunch of artists like that. So as the music industry is sort of fractured and changed, and you guys all know that, that it's small micro markets, it's individual taste in music. I think film is going to go that same way. I mean, the idea that you're going to make a big feature film is going to be on 35 screens around the country. That's really a different industry there, but there are going to be ways that you're going to tell your stories in a visual form through micro cinemas, through online, on demand, through festival releases that ultimately get them sold. I mean, there's ways of doing it. Obviously, you guys have got iPads and iPhones and all that kind of stuff. That's going to be different ways of doing this business of telling stories in a visual way. So you just got to be, as writers, be writer creative. Okay, so don't say I got to write a 120-page script. Maybe it's a 6-page script. I've actually watched some of your films here, and you understand short films usually have to be clever and inventive and tell little short stories. So it's just figuring out how you tell a 6-minute story, and maybe it's a sequence of stories, maybe it's short stories, maybe it's actually what I call citizen journalism. Maybe you just decide we're going to do these little pieces, and it's going to go online as a web series. But there's not been a better time ever for this. But get out of the idea that Hollywood is going to save you. That's a different place and a different business right now, as it changed the music industry.
I think it's like Hollywood's running like a pick-me culture. Like, we're going to pick this one person out, they're going to be the next big thing. That's not the way it runs anymore. Like, there's more outlets than ever. There's an inclusive